public financial management in India is a bit complex and simple also, both ways, because it's very much within the framework which has been provided by the Constitution. Article 265 of the Constitution says that there cannot be any taxes without the authority of Parliament, and 266 says that no money can be taken out of the consolidated fund until and unless it has been appropriated through the budget process. Now, these two are the main articles for public financial management in the country, especially when regards to the parliamentary financial control. One point. Second point, an issue comes that expenditure on public utility must be met by those persons whom these public utilities serve. Now, unfortunately, in India, the states have not been formed based on economic viability. They have been formed on many other reasons. So, states are not economic viable. Now, if you compare the per capita revenue of states, it will range from something about 400 in Arunachal Pradesh to something about 10,000 in Goa. So, and the per capita expenditure remains the same. The impact of per capita expenditure may differ because of efficiency level and corruption level, but look at the difference in per capita revenue collection of a state and per capita expenditure of a state. Now, this gap is to be funded by the central government. So, that way the states in India, as per the Constitution and as per its geography and economic conditions, have to depend on the central government. So, this is one point which is very simple. Then comes the issue that in which way this grant comes to the state government. You know, there is multiplicity of schemes. You have central schemes, you have centrally sponsored schemes, and then you have state schemes. Now, central schemes are funded by center. Centrally sponsored schemes could be in a state sector or could be in the central sector. Now, this is also unfortunate that I always feel, why should the state sector subject, that is the list 2 subject, be funded by the central government? Because when you have a list 2, then money should be given to the state government and they should decide what to do with it. But then we have so many of centrally sponsored schemes in our country. Fortunately, with this current government, it has come down because now the number of centrally sponsored schemes has been reduced, and what has been increased is the direct grant which goes through the Finance Commission to the state government, which has increased to 42%. 15th Financial Commission will come and probably it may go even further up or whatever. So, the point is that central transfers in our country are a must, and along with central transfers there is a constitutional provision of setting up a Finance Commission which works out all these issues, that how the money should go. Now, coming down to the problem of public financial management, I think one problem I said is about the multiplicity of schemes. At one time, a few years back, I found that even for girl child, there were 11 central sponsored schemes. Today, it has been reduced to 5. Even 5 are a big sum, because you don't know whether all these 5 are targeting the same girl child, because we have no control on that. So, that is one issue about the multiplicity of schemes in various sectors. Then the second issue comes, you know, we have had for many years something like a target based administration, target based evaluation of schemes. I remember, you know, that way back that I was working in Masuri Academy and we had someone from UP coming up. I am talking of 81, 82. And then this gentleman from UP, a bureaucrat, was saying that UP has won the first prize in the then 20-point program. So, they had won a first prize in family planning. Pick up the census of 1990 and 2000, UP has got the second highest population growth. So, if you win a prize in family planning, and then how is it that, you know, your population growth has been second high? Now, that's the scheme, that's the, you know, beauty of your targetitis. Now, why should this kind of a targetitis be there? And somehow, with the coming of outcome budget, today it has been reduced to quite some extent. So, this target based evaluation of schemes had been a big problem. If you go back in time, you will find that we had a concept of performance budgeting in the 70s. Then we came up with, during VP Singh's time, you know, a zero based budgeting. And then Chidambaram came with this concept of outcome budget. And finally, I find that in the current budget for the last 3-4 years, outcome budget has really found a good place in our budget documents. In fact, if you make a distinction between output and outcome, outcome is the impact which that expenditure creates. So rather than measuring the output, the issue is that we should be measuring the outcome, and today the effort is in that direction only, that we should be. For example, why should we be bothered about that how many persons have passed, how many students have passed the exam? We should be concerned about the literacy rate. It's like, how do you work out this kind of what you call the key performance indicator? So that is the second issue about the target based evaluation. Then the third issue comes up, which again is very important as far as I am concerned, that we are not very clear about very effective and correct interpretation of law when it comes to really implementing the law. Take the issue of pollution control. India is one of the very few countries which in 1974 came up with a law against pollution, the Water Prevention of Pollution Act 1974. Now this act prohibits that no industry should send its wastage into the rivers and all that, and it also says that polluted water means that where the extent of pollutant is higher than a certain prescribed percentage. It also created these pollution control boards and empowered the boards to check whether pollutants coming out are in excess or not. And if they were in excess, ultimately a person could be jailed. Till today, I don't think, from 74 to 2020, I don't think anyone has been jailed. I don't have the data, but I don't think anyone has been jailed. Had this law been implemented in 74, our rivers would have been much better today. So that is the second issue, which I think about the effective implementation of a law coming up like that. So I think these are the 2-3 issues which have to be taken care of if we want to make our public financial management a bit more effective and bit more oriented towards creating the necessary impact which we think this expenditure should be creating. See, public financial management is not a job of accountants. Accountants will only keep the account and strengthen the process of public financial management. So it's the job of those bureaucrats who have been charged with this kind of a responsibility to deliver, because government ultimately is all about delivery. And if the delivery is taking place to the right beneficiary, in the right quality, in the right quantity, and at the right time. Ramcharitmanas says, "Ka varsha jab krishi sukhane." So then I call it a good delivery, and then good delivery leads to good governance. So ultimately it is the work given to a bureaucrat who is in charge of implementation of these programs. Through accounting, he will get the necessary data about how much has been spent, how much money is available, how much more is required, in years to come and all that. But it is basically the job of a bureaucrat. Now, we keep talking of political will, but I think more than the political will, it is the bureaucratic apathy which is making the process, coming up with whatever fault it has as on today. I mean, if a policy has been made, and we keep talking about it for the last so many years, that we have had a policy, but unfortunately the implementation has not been good. So why have a policy where you think that the implementation will not be good? So it boils down to the issue of accountability, that the bureaucrats who are supposed to deliver, has their delivery been to the extent it should be? And there the issue comes up of internal controls. What controls they have on this delivery, that the delivery is to right beneficiary, right quality, right quantity, and in time. Take Manrega. Two issues come in Manrega. One issue will be to whom you are giving the money, who is the beneficiary. And second issue will be that whether you are giving money for a work which has already been completed to satisfaction. Now, to whom you are giving the money, we know that in many cases the beneficiaries are not correctly selected as per the guidance, guidelines which has been given. And there is no control on that. Even audit cannot find that out, because audit cannot go beyond paper. Second issue comes up, that on what basis are you making the payment? A base comes up in works is about what we call a measurement book. Now, in a measurement book, it should be written on a daily basis. Now, we have seen in audit that measurement books are written some 3, 4, 5 months later. And on what basis the payment is made, that basis itself is faulty. Now, this requires close supervision by the persons who are sitting there, be at Sarpanch level or at Tehsildar level or the ADM or the DM level. If that close supervision, which is a part of the internal control as per the COSO framework also, then I think things would be far better. So, I consider it primarily the bureaucratic apathy, which is a much bigger hindrance to the process of public financial management. You see, when we are talking of float, what is a float? Float is when money comes out of the government fund and it has not been spent. So, it is lying with a private person or lying with a private party. When you think of spending the money through the government department, the concept of float does not arise, because general financial rule, which is basically the Bible or the Gita for public expenditure, it prohibits making any advance payment. Rule 172, I think, of GFR says that no advance payment should be paid by a government. That means payment should be made only after the work has been completed. So, float issue does not arise if it is done through a government department. So, the general financial rules are very clear that no advance payment can be given to a government department. Payment can be made only when you have incurred the expenditure. So, issue of float does not arise in the previous time. But then what was happening during this kind of a system, that monies were being released to the department much later, toward the end of March. So, expenditure was not taking place. So, the government shifted to getting expenditure done or these schemes delivered through NGOs or through private societies. And there they started giving them advance, so this issue of float arises. And there were also constitutional issues also at that point of time. I remember we had pointed that out, that money cannot go to a particular department outside the consolidated fund. And also there were issues that when you were giving money to these societies, what kind of documentation they were keeping so that the expenditure could be audited. But with the introduction of PFMS, things have been sorted out to quite some extent. There are still issues which have to be taken care of, but things have still been sorted out. PFMS has been given a very high importance in the GFR also. The general financial rules provide that the PFMS should be implemented by each department of the government, and they must ensure that whatever agencies are there under that department, each agency must get registered under the PFMS. All payments should be made through the PFMS, and ultimately whatever kind of bank balance is available with that particular agency should be known to the government department, and they should not have more than their 3 months of requirement as their bank balance. This is what the PFMS scheme provides for. So, if payment of money to these societies is being controlled in this manner that their bank balance should not be more than 3 months expenditure, the issue of float has been sorted out to quite some extent. It cannot be made zero, not really required. It certainly cannot be made zero. It can be made zero if you are incurring it through the government department, but then we run into different kind of a problem. So, that is one issue which comes up to my mind, that PFMS, then linked to PFMS is also the integrated financial management system of the state government, which is an integrated kind of system where all financial transactions of the state government have been put together in this. The issue comes up that today PFMS and IFMS are not talking to each other, and that again has been one of the issues which I consider very important, that when you develop systems across a country like India, the data structure must have been same between PFMS and IFMS. I don't know, I have not looked into the data structure, because PFMS has come up after many years of work. The Government of India started with accounts 2000, and then they came up with something like compact, then they came up with e-Lekha, and now all these have finally come into PFMS, and I am told that e-Lekha will very soon disappear and everything will be done through PFMS also. But as I said, it is not linked electronically to IFMS. And another issue comes up, that even the state government the IFMS is not linked to the Accountant General's account keeping, you know. So I think once these issues are settled, then things certainly will become far better than what they are today. See, GFI provided just-in-time funding because payment was being made only after the expenditure has been incurred. But once you do that, then you know not many delays come up in making payment to the final party. But now that the payment is being made by these NGOs and the societies, then the issue is that there will be some delay always, because some of one of the ills of the system is submission of the utilization certificate, because many NGOs and the societies do not submit the utilization certificate. And if you look into the audit report of the CAG of India, you will find nearly in case of each state, n number of utilization certificates are pending. Number one. Number two, that sometimes even these utilization certificates are not correctly worked out, and they have been given even without completion of the work, because some of the state governments are also very keen that they must get the money coming from central government even if the expenditure has not taken place. I mean, I have seen in one or two cases that utilization certificate has been given where the money has not really been utilized, because this has come out in our audit reports in quite a few times. So just-in-time funding is possible once your systems speak to each other, once you know there is a system available across the country which speaks to each other. Just-in-time funding will be possible. I think once IFMS and you know PFMS they get integrated, then it should be possible. Accountability is paramount, because if accountability is not there, then it becomes very difficult to pinpoint why things have gone wrong. Accountability basically means that has someone who was given a particular responsibility, has he been able to discharge that ability for the purpose for which he was given that responsibility. That is what accountability would mean. Bureaucracy in India is safe as regards Article 311 of the Constitution is concerned, because it provides safety to the bureaucrats. It says that no bureaucrat can be asked to quit unless a proper procedure has been followed and things like that. So there is no such issue that a bureaucracy must have any fear. But the point comes up, what are the rules and regulations we are having to ensure that this accountability is really implemented to ensure effective implementation of programs. Take the Prevention of Corruption Act. It had certain clause, I think section 13(1)(d) or something, which came under a lot of criticism after the Colgate scam, when one secretary was unfortunately imprisoned. This law was amended. Actually, it was not amended, it was diluted. Then even the Whistleblower Act, now even that act has been diluted very much. So the point comes up that if we have an act, now you know, like, let me put it in a different manner. Countries where the accountability is paramount and corruption is minimum, you will find that there are no anti-corruption laws. You take any of the Scandinavian countries, you know, Norway, Sweden, and take New Zealand, there are no anti-corruption laws. The only issue is that if there is a law, it must be implemented in the right spirit. But if we keep on having a law after another, like we have a Prevention of Corruption Act, we have a Lokpal Act, and we have CVC, and you know, we have so many other organizations for ensuring accountability. But everywhere where dilution comes up in the implementation of the law, then accountability gets impacted. Now, what are the factors for accountability? You know, like you have the Parliament, the supreme body of the country. Through question hour, accountability of the government can take place. You have the media, but unfortunately, you know, the way media behaves these days, somehow it has lost that kind of a strength what it had to give accountability. But still, wherever media picks up a particular issue, we know, we have seen cases, you know, that how it comes up and all that. Then you have audit. Audit is another instrument of ensuring accountability. But if you look into the process of audit, there are n number of audit observations which remain outstanding for years to come. Very recently, I was doing some work for local fund audit department of Rajasthan government. I find that something about 30 lakhs audit observations are pending there from 1980 downwards. 30 lakhs. You can check on their website. Now, if so many audit observations are pending, does audit has a meaning in that? I was, on the board of a public sector company. Now, there again I found that their internal audit was doing good work. But then of the 100 observations which they pick up in a year, hardly 5 or 6 will get closed. So, I said, why are you having internal audit at all? If you are not willing to agree to their findings or their observations, or if you are not willing to take action on their observations, why have the internal audit? So, the point is, if audit is taken in the right spirit and the audit observations are really settled in time, accountability can be ensured. And I make that distinction, that audit does not enforce accountability, it promotes accountability. It is the organization like CBC and the CBI, they can enforce accountability, or even through supervision the department can enforce the accountability. And audit or someone can promote accountability by telling what things are going wrong. But accountability is paramount. I think when we talk of performance appraisal management, the point comes up that are we having a very clear role allocation? Because if the role allocation is clear, then you can pinpoint as to who has gone wrong. When there is a diffusion in role allocation, role confusion leads to goal confusion, then you find that certainly issues will be there where you will not be able to pinpoint as to whose particular responsibility it was. Government of India has come up various times, various performance evaluation system. They had this RFP, that, and now they have this 360-degree evaluation of an individual, where not only his boss, but his colleagues and even his juniors are consulted in finding out as to how his performance has been. The point comes up that when a duty is given to an individual, and if that duty can really be put down in a very specific dimension, then his performance can be evaluated against that. Again, making the distinction between output and outcome, that yes, I have given you the output, but has that output created the outcome? If the outcome has been created, performance should be valued. If you are valuing someone's performance on output, maybe things will not be good. You see, single source of data is not a requirement, it is essential. Because if single source of data is not there, then you find data discrepancies coming up. If you pick up 1 year's account, then you will have 3 reports coming up. One will be from the state government, from the treasury, one will be from the accountant general, from the CAG, and one will be from the RBI. All these 3 differ, which is very unfortunate. Now, ideally what should happen, because the spending unit in any government is what we call a DDO, a drawing cum disbursing officer. Now, it's the DDO which initiates the payment. I mean, I am not going into other details that a sanction comes and all that. But once the payment is being initiated by the DDO, that should be the point where initial data is captured. Then the bill gets passed by the treasury, payment is made, and it goes to the accountant general office for accounting, or it goes to RBI, for various other things. Now, all this should originate from this. Now, in many cases, for quite many years, state governments were maintaining their accounts, and then they were passing the vouchers to the to the AG office, and they were re-inputting this. Fortunately, it is not there today in most state governments. They are getting the electronic data as such. But even then, there have been data entry errors, because the control on data entry is not what it should be. IT process would say that there must be a reasonable control to ensure that there is a reasonable data accuracy. Now, what is a reasonable data accuracy can be left to interpretation depending on the kind of data you are using. In certain data, it has to be 100%. But then, if someone comes up to me and says that, look, my data is 80% correct. Now, to me, it makes no sense at all, because if there are 100 treasuries, do I take it which treasury I am picking up, whether it's correct data or incorrect data? So, I need to have that reasonable accuracy of data, which comes up when initially data is being captured and then flowing from there wherever it has to go. So, at that point of time, the data must be ensured that it is 100% accurate. Leave the financial transaction. Take all other IT systems. Personal data of an individual, of your, of mine, has been captured for Aadhaar, has been captured for National Population Register, has been captured for PAN, for GST, and it has been captured for your ration card, it has been captured for your electoral process, for your voter ID, all at different places. Now, same data of an individual, of mine or yours, has been captured at 10 different places at 10 different times. So, what my PAN shows my residential address is of 1995. Since then, I have changed 4 houses. So, the point is, all this data of mine somewhere was differing till I shifted to my house, and I made sure that in all these documents, in all these systems, I have the same data. I mean, I have done it, but not many, because not possible. Like after retirement, I had the time to go through and do all that. So, the point is, there also it comes up that why must we have duplicity of data entry? You capture data once, take it wherever you have to take it, and then finish with it. So, it is important not only for financial transaction, even for other transaction also, and that requires a robust IT policy. Now, today when you talk of an IT policy, take treasury computerization, take your transport computerization. Now, everywhere the state governments have not really followed what the central government wanted them to do. Treasury computerization, most states have gone and developed their own systems. Good enough, they are entitled to do that because accounts is a state subject. But when Chhattisgarh was formed out of Madhya Pradesh, they didn't take up Madhya Pradesh accounting system, they developed their own. I never understood why should they develop their own, why couldn't they continue with what was happening there earlier. So, most states have their own accounting systems, they don't differ much, but then the data structure differs. So, it becomes really difficult to combine all that data and produce something like a central accounts. Today, the office of the CAG publishes what we call the central revenue accounts and all that, where we have consolidation of the entire country's accounts. It takes 1 year for preparation because of these kind of discrepancy. Ideally, when we have put our accounts on computerization, it should be an overnight job to compile all that data and come out with whatever we want. So, integrity of data, ensuring that the data entry takes place only once, is something a very essential requirement and requires a policy pronouncement by the government on that. See, the fortunate thing is that somehow accounts are not given the kind of importance. It's coming out of an ill. Accounts are not given the kind of importance by the bureaucrats what it should have been given. So, they don't depend too much on the accounting figures as such. So, whether they get the figure from there. So, today the bureaucrats are very happy. I am talking the state government. They are very happy, the data what they get from the state government, from the treasuries. So, this discrepancy does not really impact much, create any adverse impact on implementation of a policy, because they are happy, like the finance secretary would be picking up data from the state treasury. AG office data will come to him, a month or 2 months later, and he may not even look into that. Though, because Constitution provides the authority to the CAG to compile the data, Article 149 and the CAG's DPC Act. So, that is considered authentic. But then dependence of the bureaucrat is on the data which is given to them by the treasury, because it comes to them on a day-to-day basis. So, that easy availability of the data makes them depend more on the treasury. So, that way this discrepancy does not really create much of a problem, as regards the implementation is concerned. I mean, whatever problems are there, they are different, but because of this, no further problem comes up as such. So, as I said that if there is an integration between the treasury accounting system and the accounting system of the accountant general, and also between the IFMS and the PFMS, then I think these things can be addressed very well. You know, the Constitution of India, because the CAG is governed by the Constitution of India, Article 149 says that the CAG shall audit all matters in relation to expenditure from consolidated fund and should also keep the accounts. Now, this has come down in the CAG's DPC Act, Duties, Power and Conditional Service Act 1971, where I think section 10 of the Act says that the duty of the CAG is to keep the accounts. This Act was amended in 1976 when CGA was created and the Indian Civil Account Service was created. So, at the central level, the central government has taken over the accounting function. CAG DPC Act says very clearly that CAG shall keep the accounts with reference to the state government as long as the governor of that state wants it. But if the governor decides to take over the accounts, then the CAG will have to give over the accounts. Somehow states have not asked for accounts, so the CAG continues to doing that. Some states have taken over the entitlement functions, provident fund and pension and payment and all that, but accounting none of the states has taken over as of now. In my personal view, views differ in this. In my personal view, it will be much better if accounting is given over to the state government and CAG does only the audit. This issue of conflict of interest many keeps talking about, because India is, I think, one of the very peculiar country where accounting and auditing both continue with the CAG of India. And many keeps asking question, that is there a conflict of interest? There is none, because in 1984 the Indian Audit and Accounts Department, that is the department with the CAG of India, it got divided between accounting function and the auditing functions. So, today in each state you will find that there is an accountant general which is in charge of audit and there is another accountant general which is in charge of accounts. And these two are not talking to each other on a day-to-day basis, and accounts prepared by the accountant general in charge of accounts are audited by the accountant general who is in charge of audit. So, there is absolutely no conflict of interest. These two things are being kept separately and being done by two different offices with two different mandates. But again, as I said, in my personal view, I will be very happy if accounts are given to the state government. They do the accounting and the Indian Audits and Accounts Department only become the Indian Audit Department or the Supreme Audit Institution of India. It's a very difficult question to answer, because if we go back in time, before 1924, there was only one accounting system, which was the civil account system or whatever you call it. Railways got bifurcated. In fact, I think before railways the military account service was created. Then railways got bifurcated. Then the PNT Finance and Account Service came in 1976. So, initially we had only one accounting service, but over a period of time, because of various requirements, other accounting services have come up. Railways keep their accounts on commercial basis, so they have a different accounting system. Defense has different requirement, because accounting basically is an executive function. It is supposed to be assisting the executive or giving the executive the kind of information based on which certain decisions can take place. Now, this kind of requirement which comes from accounts are different for defense, for railways, for PNT. Like PNT, you talk about, it's a much more complicated accounting system when you talk of revenue. Now, issue of revenue recognition, on which so many things have taken place that, your BSNL, when do you recognize the revenue coming up and all that, which is much different than revenue recognition in the central government or in the state government. So, the point is each of these departments have different accounting requirements. It is certainly possible, all these accounting services to come together, but then it will become a policy decision. And apart from that, it will create a lot of administrative issues If you see that last year the decision was taken to integrate all the railway services, and I think it's creating a lot of administrative issues, that how the cadre will be managed and all that. So it's a big question whether this kind of an integration of all the accounting services is required, and if it is required, then how it can be done and what all problems it will create. So this basically will remain a policy decision, and I don't see in the near future any such thing happening. What is a policy? A policy is basically an intent of the top management. You can have a policy in your home that everyone must be on the dining table at 9 o'clock. So it's the intention of the top management of the government that how things should be regulated, how they should move, or how everyone should behave. That's the policy. Who frames the policy? In our country, we have what we call the separation of power. So you have the legislature, you have the executive, and you have the judiciary. Now, Article 75(3) of the Constitution makes the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister accountable to the Parliament. It makes a very clear distinction between the executive, which is the Prime Minister and his council, and the Parliament, which consists of the legislatures. Both can make policies. The legislature can make policy and the government executive can make policy. If the legislature is making a policy, CAG will have no role, because legislature has been mandated by the public to make a policy. If a certain chief minister comes up and says that he will give free electricity and wins the election, who can question him? And why should anyone question him? Because he has won an election based on that, whatever promise he gave. So there is no question of, coming up with any objection on that policy. But if a policy is made by the executive, by the government of the day, Article 75(3) says that they are accountable to the Parliament. Who brings out this accountability? Only the CAG can bring that out. Judiciary can bring it out. But make a distinction between judiciary and the CAG. Judiciary is reactive in most cases. Now, there are certain cases today with the judicial activism that judiciary has started become proactive, but very rare. But primarily judiciary is reactive. They react when a writ petition comes up to them. But audit is not reactive, audit is proactive. CAG determines his own scope. Now, CAG is an instrument through which accountability of the executive of the government of the day is made to the Parliament. So, if the executive has made a policy, don't you think that there must be some body who should find out if the policy is flawed or not and bring it to the notice of the legislature and leave it to the legislature whatever they want to do with this? Because audit gives an opinion, judiciary gives the judgment which is binding. Audit opinion is not binding. It's an opinion which has been given based on examination of the records and whatever other documents, and based on that opinion the legislature can decide what further issues have to be done. Coming to a policy made by legislature, there are two ways of making policy. One is a top-down approach, that the intention of the the party in power. I gave you that example, giving free electricity or whatever. That's a top-down approach. It cannot be questioned. It can be questioned by the judiciary, because if it violates any provision of the Constitution, judiciary can object to that. But when it comes to a bottom-up approach of policy making, that means you have felt something and the bureaucracy have put things together and they have given a proposal to the legislature to make a policy. Motor Vehicles Act. The bureaucracy found that the accidents were taking place because of drunken driving or because of not wearing the seat belt and all that. So they came up with a policy based on which a law has come up saying that drunken driving will be fined so much and all that. So it is a policy which has come up through a bottom-up approach, that something was debated, discussed, data collected, and based on that collection of data, legislature was asked to formulate a policy. If the legislature is forming a policy based on incorrect data or inadequate data, who will tell to the taxpayer that no, there is something wrong? Parliament may not have time to look into data accuracy and all that. We have had cases, and we have reported that in our audit reports. When I say we, I mean the audit, Indian Audit and Account Department, because I have been part of that department. So we have had cases where we have printed reports saying that this policy was made on incorrect data or selective data. If the bureaucrats pick up certain data in a selected manner and form a policy, I don't want to name the state, but on state excise a policy was framed 2002, 2003, saying that it will be revenue neutral. When we audited that particular department for a few years, we found there was a revenue loss. And then we wanted to look into the papers. And we found that the revenue loss was known when the policy was being formulated, but it was not put up to the legislature. And we published that in our report, that the legislature was kept in dark when this policy came up. So even a policy made by the legislature will require a scrutiny whether the policy was made on accurate data or data not picked up in a selected manner. Because ultimately you make a policy, and if the policy is not sound, it does not result in transferring the benefits to the society what should have gone there. So I am very clear on that, though there are, in fact, my views are in minority, because the general thing after the 2G issue had been that CAG should not be auditing the policy, and the views of the CAG also had been like this, that no, we will not audit the policy. But I am of the opinion that yes, we must be auditing the policy, and as I made the distinction, a policy made by the executive should certainly be audited, made by the legislature should be audited from the point of view based on the data accuracy on the area in which the data has been picked up.